Chapter 13. 2 weeks later. Naruto hummed out loud as he looked at the bones of Ketsuya in the empty ballroom in his mansion. The bones had actually showed up 2 weeks ago while he was with Aurora, but like he had said, he was gonna spend time with his wife, and so he had his hybrids assemble the bones in here and let them sit until he was ready to do something with them. Aurora, Rebecca, and Bonnie were in the room as well. So, how do you want to do this, Ketsuya? I know you're in this room on the other side. I can literally feel your presence through nature. Resurrect yourself so we can talk about killing Silas. And be quick about it. I don't have all day. Naruto out loud. Why exactly are we waiting for her to resurrect herself? I figured you were capable of doing it. Bonnie asked. I am plenty capable, but your ancestor literally created immortality, something that was not thought to be possible until she came along, then she created a supernatural limbo. She is probably the most powerful witch to ever live, and considering one of the strongest is my wife Morgana, that's high praise. I figure a witch like that is plenty capable of restoring herself to life. Naruto said. It was at that moment that a swirling sound could be heard throughout the room. What little light existed in the room dimmed until most of the light in the room was coming from the assortment of Ketsuya's bones. A strange yet natural warmth emanated from the bones as they floated into the air, positioning themselves in the shape of a prone human body. The ligaments and cartilage in the joints that kept the bones together reformed from nothing as ancient magic hummed in the air. Red muscle and flesh formed around the bones for several moments, until Ketsuya's body looked like one of those mannequins of a human body without its skin that might be found in a science classroom, except it was female. A white curtain on one of the windows flew off its hinges, its shape and texture changing to that of a soft cotton dress in the ancient Greek style as it wrapped around Ketsuya's body. Rebecca and Aurora, to their credit, only stared in awe, as in their long lives interacting with witches every day, they had never seen or heard of a witch or warlock resurrecting themselves. Bonnie, for her part, stared in shock as her jaw dropped. Inexperienced as she was, this was something that blew her mind many times over. Naruto, on the other hand, had fully expected this, estimating that if Ketsuya had created the other side and immortality, then resurrecting herself should be part of her skill set, particularly if she had a starting point, so she did not have to form the bones from scratch. With that, her skin formed from her toes and slowly grew itself around the entire body. Once that happened, her hair and nails grew out until they reached the length that they were when she died. Ripples could be seen underneath her skin as her organs were restored to perfect, working condition. The vampires in the room could hear her heart start to beat as she took her first breath in over 2 millennia, staring at Naruto with her brown eyes. So, Ketsuya said as she took the hand that Naruto offered her and stood on her feet, what's this about wanting to help me kill the immortal bastard? Before we get into that, Naruto said, getting everyone's attention, it is only 7 in the morning on a Saturday. So, first we will have breakfast, and then, I will tell you how we are going to kill Silas. 30 minutes later, after about half an hour, the group was sitting in the main dining hall. An assortment of various omelets, sausage links, milk, orange juice, several types of bacon, and even some alcoholic drinks were laid out on various dishes, all cooked by the original tribrid himself. Ketsuya could not help but moan a little bit at how good everything tasted. Her era had none of this delectable food and she savored every bite and drop that went down her throat. Good. You like mimosa, he said to her as she took a sip. Yes, but not as much as the bacon. In my day, it was all about lamb. No one ever had the bright idea of curing pig fat. Tessa said nostalgically. They didn't really come up with bacon until the 16th century, so believe me, we know. Aurora said. So, are we gonna talk about this delicious food all day or are you going to tell me what this business with Silas is? She challenged the entire group, specifically Naruto. Okay, I'll get to the heart of the matter, Naruto said as he set his utensils down and folded his hands together on the table before getting serious. The other side has started to become a royal pain in my ass lately. Naruto continued making his point. Allow me to elaborate on that. In the early 13th century, when Constantinople fell during the Fourth Crusade, I killed my stepfather for the first time. A few centuries later, I found out that he had been brought back to life by a gaggle of fools consisting of the Gemini Coven and the Travelers. I killed him again recently, but just as quickly, the woman that gave birth to me, sealed away my werewolf nature, and left me to suffer at my stepfather's hands. Esther Michaelson came back to life with the intention of wiping out all of her children after I killed her last time. And the point my husband is trying to make, dear, is that these are two of our most hated enemies. Rebecca pointed out, the fact that they had to be killed more than once is a bit of a pain in the ass. Our enemies that remain, though they are few and far between as we've made a point of killing most of them over the centuries, can resurrect other enemies that we've killed and start working together to hurt us. There is another point, Aurora said as she put down her drink. The other side also benefited us once upon a time, as if one of us needed to be resurrected, Naruto could simply bring us back. But recently, the only true weakness that could cause us death was eliminated, so the only argument any of us really had for keeping the other side around went away when all the originals received the upgrade that eliminated our one true weakness. You've also caused me problems as well, Ketsia. That business with your descendant 900 years ago exposed our world to humans at large. As king, it's my duty to ensure that humans in large part don't discover the supernatural world. That little debacle forced me to do damage control by making the lot of us into fiction and putting the entire Bennett bloodline into my service. Naruto said. It had been 1,000 years since I had died and I had started to realize that Silas was still alive. I saw a chance to take him out and thought, why not? Silas clearly needed help with dying, so I created the hunters and had my descendant do the spell for me. Ketsia said. I was alive 2,000 years ago, by the way. There was no king of all supernaturals then. All you did is gathered a bunch of people in a room, claimed to be the king, and conquered everyone that disagreed with you. How do you think kings are made? Have you ever read the Old Testament of the Bible? God was not almighty because he was right. He was right, because he was almighty. Naruto said rhetorically. Besides, someone had to do it. With people like you and your descendant, running around and fucking up the natural order of things, somebody had to instill order in the craziness of the supernatural. So, we've told you why we want it gone. Now, how about you explain your side of the story? Naruto offered kindly, surprising the paranoid woman. While I'm sure if you already know that I created immortality and the other side, then you were able to piece together what happened back then. Why do you even need to hear it? She asked in surprise. There is always a side to every story. The legend about you and Silas was muddied by the time we were born. I've been able to piece together that it was you who was responsible for creating immortality and such, but we only know that he betrayed you and punished him. We've got time, so we'd like to hear your story. Naruto offered as Ketsia drank the last of her mimosa. If I'm gonna tell this story, I'll need another drink, she said, and Naruto got her some more. Silas wasn't always the monster he became. He used to be a much simpler man, in love with a simple girl. His soulmate. She was his one true love. Hey, you know how that goes. I thought our love would last forever. So, wait, you're telling me that you were Silas's one true love? Bonnie asked, causing Ketsia to look at her descendant. He had been my friend for a long time. That friendship eventually turned into love, and I know, despite what happened, that he once felt something for me too. I would have done anything for him. Ketsia, remembering the good times they once shared. Their picnics by the village stream, their displays of magic impressing the rest of the coven. All of the once happy memories now tainted and poisoned by how Silas betrayed her. So, is that why you did the impossible? You know, making immortality a thing. Bonnie asked. When you're in love, you're more easily able to bend the rules of what's possible. Silas and I were the two most powerful members of a gifted people called Travelers. This was before the coven became the body-possessing coven that you knew. When we were engaged to be married, we decided to reach even further. We wanted to find a way for our love to last forever. Silas convinced me that he loved me so I would make the immortality spell for us, but then I found out that he was just using me. Ketsia said. So, you've been holding on to this grudge for over 2,000 years. Seems like a long time, don't you think? Bonnie asked. You have clearly never been left at the altar. Ketsia retorted. Like a lovesick idiot, I created an entire garden for our wedding, and I made a spell that would keep us alive forever, an immortality spell so we would never have to part. Silas and I were going to drink the immortality elixir as the final part of our wedding ceremony, but then everything around me started to die. My wedding flower, the garden trellis, our harvest. And then I realized why. Silas had already used the immortality spell. He was already drinking the elixir somewhere else. He took what he wanted, and then the bastard abandoned me. So, call me a woman scorned or a vindictive bitch or whatever label suits your story, but I thought I was his one true love, and then he ripped my heart out. Ketsia said, her voice cracking as she felt a tear roll down one cheek. Bringing up the old memories and how someone she had trusted with everything had used her, betrayed her, ripped out her heart, and pissed on the remains always made her sad. She had been the most powerful witch, but she had also been a lovesick fool. The way she had been betrayed had ruined her. I'm sorry, Naruto said as he put his hand on Ketsia's. I deserved a chance to look him in the eye and make him understand how much he hurt me. So, I found him in the wilderness with the woman he gave my immortality to, the woman he chose over me. And just when I thought his betrayal couldn't cut any deeper, I learned that his actual true love was someone very close to me, my handmaiden and my father's mistress, Amara. Ketsia said. So, Silas was the first version of Stefan Salvatore, and your friend was the first version of Elena? Bonnie asked. Amara was no friend of mine. When they drank the immortality elixir, they violated the natural law that all living things must die, so nature found a balance by creating mortal shadow selves. Doppelgangers, all caused by the ripple effect from Silas and Amara's sin. Ketsia explained. So whatever happened to Amara? I mean, we all know that Silas is locked deep inside a tomb on that one island, but what about the woman he cheated on you with? Is she in a tomb as well? Bonnie asked. No, Bonnie Bennett. That slut is not in a tomb. Ketsia explained. Silas had stepped away from the tent and walked into the woods, likely to relieve himself. I fell upon Amara. The bitch was completely unapologetic and rubbed it in how Silas didn't love me. I used my magic to spill her blood all over the tent and desiccated her before hiding the body. When Silas came back a few minutes later, I made him think that I had killed Amara. He tried to hurt me in his anger, but I still had my magic, unlike him, and gave him a continuous aneurysm before offering him the cure. He didn't take it, so I knocked him out and he woke up locked inside the tomb with only the cure, and the only way to break out was either with my magic or taking the cure. He chose to starve rather than become mortal again and accept Amara was a mistake. I thought eventually he would take it and kill himself to be with Amara, only to realize that she was petrified as a statue, the gateway to the other side that all supernatural creatures pass through, as well as the anchor that keeps it together. It also helps that Amara is forced to experience the death of every single supernatural creature endures. Over the last 2 millennia, that's hundreds of thousands of deaths. You call that a second chance? You've tormented them for millennia, how can you say that they deserve that? Bonnie asked in horror. He betrayed me in the worst way possible. He's lucky I even offered him a chance to make amends. Ketsia growled at her naive and judgmental descendant. Besides, you are hardly one to talk. Before you fell in with this crowd, you didn't even believe in your heritage. It took the vampires arriving in your town for you to finally take it seriously, and then you went and got your grandmother killed trying to help the doppelganger. For a bit, you stayed out of the vampire business, but then you got sucked back in because you're a pathetic fool that doesn't respect herself or know how to say no. You let yourself become a quick fix for all their problems, never mind the fact that such simple spells brought you to the brink of death because you are decades behind everyone else in their practice of magic. I may have made Amara and Silas suffer for 2,000 years, but I did everything of my own free will. Enough, Naruto said as he slammed his hand on the table, cracking it, and bringing the 2 witches out of their little spat. Bonnie started to cry a bit as she was brutally reminded about how her former friends had treated her. Aurora and Rebecca took charge and gave the poor girl the hug she desperately needed. A look between the three vampires and Rebecca and Aurora took Bonnie out of the room to comfort her, leaving Naruto and Ketsuya alone. Calming himself, Naruto turned to Ketsuya. I'm not discounting what you suffered at Silas's hands, but Bonnie has suffered enough for her association with the doppelganger. She doesn't need to be reminded about what she's lost. I beg to differ, Ketsuya said. You may have convinced her to stop sacrificing herself for now, but there is a chance she may have fallen back into her old ways. You can't twist the knife deep enough to make her change because you care about her feelings. I, on the other hand, can. Try looking at it from my perspective for a moment. Back then, I was the last of my bloodline, and I had children because I didn't want our clan's history to end with me. Now, there are only two Bennetts left in the world. One is a former self-sacrificing martyr and the other is a pathetic nomad who's afraid of commitment. When that's all your bloodline has left, it tends to rub you the wrong way, especially after the sacrifice I made in continuing said bloodline in my lifetime. Ketsuya said, and Naruto knew she was talking about Lucy. Naruto knew the type of woman Lucy Bennett was. She was a commitment phobe, always trying to escape emotional closeness and detach herself from others. Honestly, it was pathetic. How about we get back on track with Silas? We still need to complete the hunter's mark. Naruto said exasperatedly as he pinched his nose in frustration. You don't need the mark. Ketsuya said, getting his attention. I only created the hunters because I couldn't come back before. Now that I'm here, I can open the tomb myself. Wait a minute, if you've been able to come back this whole time, why haven't you done it? Naruto asked. Because before I couldn't resurrect myself. Even as powerful as I am, I need something to start from. Like the veil that separates the world from the other side being dropped, or my bones being gathered in one place. The only way to resurrect myself without those conditions is to reincarnate myself, and that's not true resurrection, because I'd be a different person, and I never wanted to forget what was done to me. Ketsuya said. Okay, fine. So, you know more about this part than me. Is there anything we need to do before we enter the tomb? Naruto asked. Before we do, I need Silas's doppelganger. I need you to bring me Stefan Salvatore. Ketsuya said. 1 day later. So, why exactly did you need me here again? Stefan asked as he was bound in a chair, surrounded by vines. In order to destroy the other side like your friend wants, we have to open the tomb that Silas is buried in and cure both Silas and Amara of their immortality. The cure to their immortality is buried with Silas. Ketsuya said as she prepared the ingredients for the spell. Right, but you haven't explained why we need to link their minds together yet, Naruto said. You know how vampires get stronger and faster with age. Well, it's different for Silas and Amara. They aren't any stronger than one of my hunters, but their mental powers, on the other hand, become more potent as they grow older. Ketsuya said. Right, but you took him down once before, Naruto pointed out. When he was a newly made immortal, and didn't have a grasp on his powers. Over the last 2,000 years, he has consumed dribbles of blood from stragglers that wandered onto the island and from the humans that live there. He has had a long time to hone his powers. Now, he would be able to compel masses of people. His compulsions wouldn't end when he gets taken out. He could compel any being, even a tribrid like yourself. He could enslave us both with a word and rewrite our personalities however he wants. Ketsuya said, explaining the magnitude of what her former fiancé could do. In order to nullify this terrifying advantage, I have to link his mind to his doppelganger. Casting a spell on his doppelganger will neutralize all of Silas's mental powers. Once he's weakened, we will be able to wake him without fear of being controlled by him. I should warn you though, your friend is going to be in a lot of pain, as I am essentially frying both of their brains. And as long as the link exists, Stefan won't remember who he is. You are going to want to keep him on lockdown until this is over. Once Silas is dead, I can restore Stefan's memories and he will be as he was. Ketsuya said. Stefan, Naruto said to him, asking him if he still wanted to go through with it. Just do it, all right. It's only gonna be for a few days. Just get it over with. Do it, Stefan said as Ketsia dipped her finger in what looked like molten silver, covering her fingers with it. Then I'll get started. Adatu kan lila gan breatvis shemel. 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 Ketsia chanted as she pressed her fingers on Stefan's head, causing him to shout in pain. She chanted for a full minute, the vines burning around her as Stefan shouted in pain. After a minute, the fire died and Stefan went limp, causing Valerie, who was also in the room, to rush to the aid of her beloved. It's done. They are linked now and Silas's powers are turned off. We have nothing to fear from him now. Ketsia said to Naruto, before looking at Stefan and Valerie, a bit of jealousy shining in her eyes, wishing deep down that she had someone that cared for her the way Valerie unconditionally loved Stefan. Then let's not waste any time. Our plane is ready, Naruto said as the two walked out the door of his mansion. Silas's island. Tomb. The original tribrid and the most powerful which were inside the tomb of Silas. Silas was desiccated to the point of being a statue, an indestructible statue at that. His hands were around the small box that contained the cure and the only way to get them off was to revive him. I hope you brought blood. Ketsia said. I figured we would need it when you mentioned he had been desiccated for 2 millennia, so I brought a good few. He said, patting the cooler he brought that contained over 20 bags of blood. He brought one out and started feeding Silas. You know something. You still haven't told me what happened between when you dumped Silas here and when you died. I know you mentioned you had children. Naruto said as he grabbed another bag. The first one had started to lube up the dried up joints, but it was like dumping an ocean in the Sahara. It was gonna take a good few blood bags. After I put down Silas, the travelers wanted me dead for making immortality a possibility. They were very traditional and hated that I had redefined what was possible. As the last of my bloodline, it would have ended with me. Ketsia said with a frown, the man that I married, he had affection for me but I had none left to give right after Silas. The wound was too fresh. The travelers may have wanted me dead, but like I said, they were traditional. They wouldn't kill a pregnant woman. It gave me a little more time on this earth and I made sure I wasn't the last of my bloodline. After I gave birth to my twin daughters, they came for me. I sent my husband away and he escaped before they got to me. He settled in Africa, but members of my bloodline would move around frequently. Naruto continued to listen as he was on the 7th bag and Silas was starting to look more like a recently desiccated vampire. Anyway, they didn't kill me gently. What I found ironic about all of it was when I died, I became the first occupant of the other side. I had created the prison for Silas, yet I was the first one it housed. But I got the last laugh on the travelers. From the other side, I was able to put the curse on them that made it so they could never gather in one place without causing natural disasters. Ketsia said. Naruto acknowledged in this moment that Ketsia was indeed the most powerful female magic user to ever live. While he loved Morgana like no other, he did not know if she was strong enough to pull off what Ketsia had. At this point, Silas was back to full health and gasped for air, sitting up, allowing Naruto to take the box that had the cure. Opening and verifying the cure was there, Naruto pulled the mask off of Silas's face and was greeted with the face of Stefan Salvatore. Or was it Stefan who had Silas's face? Honestly, he doppelganger shenanigans could be a real pain in the ass sometimes. Greetings, Silas, Naruto said menacingly as he slapped chains onto the powerless immortal. Today's your lucky day. You finally get to die. Naruto's mansion. 6 hours later. It was nighttime now as the most powerful witch and the tribrid walked back into his mansion with a chained Silas in tow. Silas was an irritating individual to listen to. Naruto had to stop himself several times on the flight back from ripping his spine out and using it as a whip on him. So, I'm still confused about who you are exactly. What are you, her cuddle buddy? Silas asked Naruto. He had found out very quickly when they arrived in the tomb that he no longer could use his mental powers on people. Likely Ketsia's doing, which meant she had her hands on his doppelganger. His plan now was to annoy one of them enough that they would make a mistake, which he could then kill them and take the cure before finding Amara. I'd be down for it if she is, Naruto said suggestively, causing Ketsia to look at him. Seriously though, this idiot is one of the most annoying individuals I've ever had to interact with, and considering I'm over a millennia old, that's a lot of time. What exactly did you see in him again? He can be charming when he wants to be. Ketsia said bitterly. Oh, and you'd know all about that, wouldn't you, my former fiancé? After all, you thought I loved you the whole time, when really, the universe knew I belonged with someone else. Silas taunted her. Before Ketsia could do anything, Naruto had enough and used his werewolf claws to rake out Silas's esophagus and jugular. Thanks, you didn't need to do that, Ketsia said as she watched Silas gurgle and choke on his own blood. He was getting on my nerves, Naruto said as he flicked the blood off his hand. The two of them dragged Silas into a room with a person bound in chains and wearing ancient Greek clothing. Someone he recognized quite well. On the way over here, he had a couple of his hybrids feed her a couple bags of blood to undesiccate her. Amara, Silas breathed out in shock before he looked at Ketsia in anger. This whole time. Yes, you lying piece of crap. Your beloved Amara was the anchor to the other side the whole time. I wanted you to suffer for what you did to me and I figured killing yourself to be reunited with the slut, only to find out you would be forever separated, was perfect. Didn't quite work out the way I wanted, but no matter. Ketsia said with a smirk that displayed her vindictiveness. Well, I'm tired of waiting and he's been annoying me all day. Let's get this done, Naruto said as he used magic to pull Silas to him. The bound immortal could do nothing as Naruto forced the cure into his mouth and forcibly closed his mouth, his teeth breaking open the container and releasing the elixir down his throat. That's right. Chew on it, you annoying cunt. Naruto growled as he forced Silas's mouth open and shut several times before letting him drop to the ground. After a few moments, Silas pulled himself to his feet, both Naruto and Ketsia sensing the change in him. You sense it too? Naruto asked. Yes, he's a witch again, Ketsia said. Silas used a spell to make a nearby iron poker fly at Ketsia to impale her but Naruto caught the poker. Naruto blurred at a speed that neither Ketsia nor Silas could keep up with and impaled Silas through the stomach. Silas! Amara shouted in worry. Silas groaned in pain as his stomach bled profusely. You didn't really think that was gonna work, did you? I can move faster than your next thought can pass through your mind. Naruto mocked him. Now, I would like to kill you right now, but I need you alive for just one more minute. With that, Naruto pulled out a syringe and stabbed it into Silas, filling it with his blood aka the cure. He let Silas go and vamped behind the chained Amara, stabbed the syringe into her neck and injecting her with the cure. After a moment, Ketsia and Naruto sensed the changes in Amara as her supernatural nature left her completely. Human, Ketsia informed him. Good, then that means I can now do this. Naruto said as he appeared behind Amara and chopped her head clean off with a knife hand strike to the base of the neck. Ketsia had a viscous smile on her face as she watched Naruto slaughter the whore that ruined her life. Amara! Silas cried out in anguish, seeing the woman he loved was horribly murdered. He turned to look at Naruto with anger and hatred as he pulled himself to his feet. I will kill you! I will kill you! And how do you plan to do that? Naruto mocked as he turned around and looked at him. I mean, look at you. People used to think that if you were revived, you would bring about the end times. But they didn't see what I see. They didn't see that all you are is a fool that was led around by his cock. Naruto crossed his arms as he continued, I mean, I get it. The allure of the Petrova doppelganger. I've had one before. The difference between you and me is that I didn't sacrifice my other relationships to be with one. I mean, have you seen Ketsia? I've only known her one day, and I know that she is highly intelligent, extremely loyal to those she cares about, and probably a lot of fun. Not to mention, she's exotic and hot as hell. And above all, crazy for you. I mean, most men even back then would have killed for a woman like that to be into them, even more so with today's generation. Oh please. Silas coughed as he held his stomach, using magic to heal his body as he pulled out the poker. She was needy, possessive, paranoid, and vindictive. She screwed with the order of nature just to make me suffer. I wanted out once I realized the true depth of how crazy she was. Naruto brought his hand out and lightning crackled in his hands until it condensed and shaped into a ball of lightning around his hand. He walked closer to Silas as he talked. She and I talked on the plane to your tomb. I saw her memories and she wasn't like that until you. And really, you weren't a model of human decency either. After you lied to and manipulated her into getting what you wanted, you have no right to complain about how she hurt you. After you lied to her about loving her, completely abhorrent, by way, as well as slept around on her, stole from her, and left her hanging at her own wedding, I'd say you deserve to suffer. Silas shouted as he tried to use magic on them both to throw them against the wall, but Naruto's wasn't just boasting about his speed. As Silas raised his hands to do the spell, Naruto appeared behind Silas, grabbed his hair and pulled his hair back, breaking his concentration as he was bent backwards, before Naruto shoved his lightning-covered hand through Silas's heart, destroying it completely. Silas coughed up blood and felt his life quickly leaving him, but he was aware enough to see Ketsuya walk up to him, grasping his face on either side with both hands. Rot in hell, you bastard. Phosha. She incanted the ancient Greek spell for fire, and Naruto pulled his hand out of Silas's chest cavity as every inch on his body burst into blue flames. He screamed what little he could before the magical flames snuffed out what was left of his life. He fell to the floor, now burning corpse that was quickly being turned to ash by the flames. With a quick flick of her wrist, Amara's body and head burst into the same blue flames, destroying the anchor to the other side and cure to immortality in fell swoop, while a flex of Naruto's wrist and a quick spell vanished the blood on the floor and on himself, both the room and Naruto looking spotless, minus the burning corpses. How long will it take for the other side to stop existing? Naruto wondered out loud as the two watched the bodies burn. The limbo that is the other side has been around for a long time. It will take no more than 6 months to start crumbling, and no more than a year to fully collapse. Ketsuya informed him. Naruto then turned to her, his eyes not even attempting to hide the lust and attraction he's felt since she resurrected herself in his home, despite how she hurt Bonnie's feelings. So, Silas and Amara are dead. The other side will crumble away eventually, and you are alive and well again. What's next for you, I wonder? Oh, I think I'll stick around, see what all there is to see about this new world. I already like the food, and I want to see what else is new. What all I missed. I'll probably join your little organization for the supernatural as well, make it easy on myself since you control the majority of the world from the shadows. She said as she stared into his eyes. Although she tries to remain unaffected by Naruto's look, Ketsuya's body reacted to the attraction she feels for him. At that moment that she decided to go for it. After all, it has been over 2,000 years since she's had the pleasure of having a man in her bed, and watching him annihilate the two people that ruined her innocence made her so wet. What if I told you I needed one more thing from you at this very moment? She made sure her voice had a sensual tone to it, knowing the effect it would have on him. I would say that I can handle anything you need from me. Naruto said, his cock hardening at the tone of her voice and the smell of her arousal. She walked to stand right in front of him, admiring his ripped, manly physique. You talk a big game, handsome, but can you handle all of this? Ketsuya watched him for a moment before slipping her dress off her shoulders and letting it drop to the floor. Naruto took in the sight before him. Her body was fantastic. She had round breasts, nice flat stomach, curvy hips, and amazing legs. He grabbed her by the shoulders, pulling her in for a passionate kiss. Their tongues met immediately, each enjoying one another's taste. Ketsuya moaned when she felt his massive, hardening bulge press against her, and she wondered how it would feel when he's naked and deep inside of her. As if reading her mind, he picked her up and vamped them up to the bed, tossing her onto it. The moment she landed, she sat up slightly, watching as he undressed himself in blur of motion, and a moment later, he was as naked as she was. The moment he's naked, he swooped down to kiss her, his hands caressing her body. She moaned as his hands trailed down her stomach as he settles himself between her thighs. He thrust his hardened prick inside of her with one smooth motion. She moaned and he could feel her slick walls tighten around him. It felt amazing to be inside her. He's had thousands of witches over the centuries, but none were as powerful as Ketsia. And as sex-starved as she was, come the morning, Ketsia would be swearing herself to him as his personal witch, taking the same oaths that many witches had before her, not that she was complaining. Naruto's mansion. 5 days later. Are you sure you want to do this, Bonnie? Naruto said, as Bonnie had all of her clothes and school things set out at the foot of his door. I need to, Bonnie said as she put the last of her stuff down. She walked over to him, wrapping him in a hug, resting her head on his chest as he wrapped his arms around her slim waist. Ever since vampires came into my life, everything's been turned on its head for me. I mean, everyone that I ever cared about before either abandoned me or is dead. As much as I hate what Ketsia said, she's right. I wasn't treated like a person, I was treated like a tool. Then you came into my life and everything got better. But I need a return to some normalcy. I want to go to college, I want to teach occult studies like my Grams did. You don't need to worry, Rebecca and Aurora helped me pick a college that was deep inside Apocrypha territory in New York, so I can't get hurt again, and you and the others can visit me whenever you like. Naruto understood her needs, but it certainly didn't make him feel any better. Naruto leaned in and kissed her on the forehead before saying, well, since I won't be seeing as much of you, how about I take you there in person? Bonnie nodded and Naruto started helping her move her things into the moving van. Later that night, Naruto entered the room after returning home from dropping off Bonnie at college and saw a folded letter propped against a glass decanter with, Naruto, written on the front. He picked it up, turned it over, and saw that it had a wax seal with the letter, K, imprinted on it. He opened it and read it. Naruto, after meeting with Nadia a couple times these past few weeks, I've decided to go on a world tour with my daughter. I missed so much time with her and I need to make up for that, so I can't say exactly when I'll be back. But while I'm gone, I have one last thing to offer you. I've caught wind that there is a witch in New Orleans named Jane Ann Devereaux plotting a move against you. Hunt her down. What she has to say will rattle you so deeply to your core. Love, Katarina. Well, good for you, love. Naruto said as he folded the letter back up while he wondered what this Devereaux witch wanted with him. He remembered the Devereaux clan from way back when the Michaelsons lived in New Orleans and they weren't what one would call militant, but then again, he had not been keeping an eye on New Orleans since they left. It seems now though, he would be heading back to New Orleans. Chapter 14. New Orleans. 1 month after Haley left Mystic Falls, she could be found at Rousseau's during lunchtime. She and the bartender were having a conversation. Third time in here this week. The bartender, Jane Ann, noted. I'm obsessed with the gumbo, Jane Ann. Haley admitted. You know, ladies in the 9th ward say my sister, Sophie, bleeds a piece of her soul into every dish, Jane Ann said. Jane Ann glanced across the room at her sister, who was working on the other side of the restaurant. So, I asked around the quarter about my family. Haley started. And, Jane Ann asked. Nothing. Zero. I can't find a single person who remembers them. Haley said. Because, Haley, people like you were run out of here years ago, Jane Ann said. What do you mean, people like me? Haley asked, now on edge. Did this bartender know she was a werewolf? Jane Ann walked around the bar to the other side to stand beside Haley. Sophie watched them from her spot in the kitchen. Jane Ann set a map out on the bar. In the bayou, they call the werewolves, Rougarou. She circled a point on the map. You head out there, you'll find what you're looking for. But be careful, it's the last place you'd ever want to go, Jane Ann said. Haley took the map, nodding at her in gratitude with a smile, and left the bar. Jane Ann and Sophie exchanged a glance, and Jane Ann revealed that she had several strands of Haley's hair in her hand. Lafayette Cemetery. Haley was driving down a country road. Meanwhile, Jane Ann and Sophie entered the cemetery, in which all the tombs were all above-ground mausoleums. "Don't do it, please. What if I'm wrong about her?" said Sophie. "That's the beauty of you, you're never wrong. She's the only way we're gonna get Naruto back in New Orleans," said Jane Ann. "Can we get someone else to do the spell?" said Sophie, as she didn't want her sister to die if, or rather, when she got caught. "Who? Half the witches don't believe you, the other half are too frightened to do anything," said Jane Ann. "Because they know we're gonna get caught, Jane Ann," said Sophie. "We don't have any other options and we're running out of time, Sophie," said Jane Ann. They joined hands. Sophie had tears in her eyes. "Now go. You know what you need to do." Sophie nods at her. Later that night, Jane Ann was still at the cemetery at night. She had lit several candles and appeared to be preparing a spell, arranging salt in a specific arrangement on a wooden surface. Meanwhile, Haley parked her car somewhere in the bayou and looked at her map. At the cemetery, Jane Ann lights another candle, and the map Haley was holding ignited. "What the?" Haley gasped. Haley tossed the flaming paper out of the window. Jane Ann lifted a smoking goblet to the table. Haley put her car in reverse, but the car started to produce smoke and stopped working. "You've gotta be kidding me," Haley said. Haley got out of the car. Jane Ann continued to arrange the salt into patterns on the table. Haley dialed a number on her cell phone. "Hello, I'm looking for a tow service," Haley said. Jane Ann started humming. Haley's phone produced an ear-piercing noise. She pulled it away from her ear, grimacing in pain, throwing it on the ground and destroyed it, causing the ear-splitting noise to stop hurting her sensitive werewolf hearing. As Jane Ann continued to do her spell, shadowy figures began approaching Haley, emerging from the trees. At the same moment that Jane Ann lifted a candle and blew the flame out, Haley passed out and fell to the ground. Sophie caught her exhausted sister as the others drew closer to Haley. Michaelson Family Mansion. Back in Mystic Falls at the Michaelson family mansion, Elijah had returned to report that all of Apocrypha's vampires had been successfully unsired, only to instead be updated by Rebecca and Aurora on Naruto whereabouts. "New Orleans. Why exactly has our brother gone back to our former home?" Elijah asked. "Evidently there are witches conspiring against him. So, knowing my husband, this was a mission to silence and slaughter," Aurora said. Elijah turned to leave. "Where are you going?" Rebecca demanded. "To find out who's making a move against our brother," Elijah said as he left for New Orleans. New Orleans. Back in New Orleans, Naruto entered a marketplace and headed towards a particular table where a woman wearing a headscarf sat with a crystal ball and other similar wares. Seeing Naruto, she began packing up her things. Naruto sat down at the woman's table. "Good afternoon. Got time for one more?" Naruto said in a gentlemanly manner. "I have nothing to say to you," Agnes said rudely. "Oh, now that's not very amiable, is it? You don't even know me," Naruto said, pretending to be offended. "I know what you are. Half vampire, half beast. You're a hybrid," Agnes said rudely again. "I'm the original hybrid, actually, but that part is not important," Naruto said while smiling. Naruto's expression got serious and said, "I'm looking for someone, a witch. Perhaps you might be able to help me find her." "Jane Ann Devereaux." The woman visibly reacted to the name with worry. "Sorry, I don't know," Agnes lied. Naruto felt a tingle in the back of his head, which meant his lie detection had gone off. Leaning forward, he said, "Well, now that's a lie if I've ever heard one, isn't it?" Naruto took the woman's hand on the table in his, smiling in a menacing way. "Now, you see, I know that you're a true witch amongst this sea of poseurs, so enough with the fabrications. I'm not in a patient mood today." Agnes withdrew her hand. "Look, us witches don't talk out of school in the quarter. The vampire won't allow it. Those are the rules. I don't break Marcel's rules," she said. "Marcel's rules?" Naruto asked, his eyes narrowing. She must be talking about someone else, as his Marcel, his adopted son, was dead. Marcel had been attending a play in the Opera House in 1919, a few weeks after the originals had left when Michael burned it down, and he had not heard anything since then, so he had assumed Marcel had been killed. "Where do you suppose I might find Marcel?" he asked. New Orleans bar. Naruto entered a bar where Marcel was performing a karaoke version of How You Like Me Now by The Heavy on stage. As Marcel sang, Naruto couldn't help but feel happy, angry, and betrayed. He felt happy to see his adopted son was still alive and had not been a victim of Michael. He was angry, and betrayed because Marcel was alive this whole time and never tried to reach out to Naruto and the others. Marcel finished the song, hopping down from the stage to applause, and joined a few companions, one of whom handed him a drink. Sensing he was being watched, Marcel paused before looking over at Naruto. Marcel's companions noticed the sudden tension. "Naruto," Marcel said. "Marcel," Naruto said. "Must be 100 years since that nasty business with your papa." Marcel commented. "Has it been that long?" Naruto asked rhetorically. Naruto and Marcel began to approach one another slowly. "The way I recall it, he came here looking for you after you left town. Left a trail of dead vampires in his wake," Marcel said. "And yet how fortunate you managed to survive. Michael, on the other hand, I recently sent off to hell where he belongs," Naruto said aggressively. Naruto, aggressive tone alerted Marcel's companions to stand and ready themselves for a confrontation. It turned out there were much more than just a few of them, as half the restaurant gets on its feet. "Well, if I'd known you were coming back in town, if I had a heads up," Marcel said, but was interrupted. "What, Marcel? What would you have done?" Naruto said. Naruto and Marcel were nose to nose, the air thick with tension. Marcel paused before answering. "I'd have thrown you a damn parade," Marcel said. Marcel's face breaks into a wide grin and he laughs, which Naruto returns and they embrace in a hug. Marcel drew back and placed his hands on either side of Naruto's neck. "Naruto Michaelson, my mentor, my savior, my sire, and my father. Let's get you a drink," Marcel said. In another room a few minutes later, Marcel chuckled and joined Naruto at a small private table, though they were accompanied by a few of Marcel's companions. Marcel poured drinks for Naruto and himself. "It is good to see you," Marcel said. "It's good to be back. Although please tell me the current state of Bourbon Street is not your doing." Naruto jokes. Marcel chuckled. "Something's gotta draw in the out-of-towners, otherwise we'd all go hungry," Marcel said. Naruto peered out of the corner of his eye at one of the guys flanking the doorway of the room. "I see your friends are daywalkers," Naruto commented. Yeah, I shared the secret of your daylight ring with a few buddies. Just the inner circle, though the family," Marcel said like it was no big deal. "Tell me though, how did you find a witch willing to make daylight rings?" Naruto asked. "I got the witches around here wrapped around my finger," Marcel said. Naruto chuckled. "Is that so? Maybe you can help me out a bit. I came here looking for a witch by the name of Jane Ann Devereaux. She has some business with me," Naruto said. Marcel made eye contact with one of his cohorts. "You're looking for Jane Ann? You probably ought to come with me." Marcel stood up and laughed. "Ha ha, showtime." New Orleans French Quarter. Nighttime. Out on a street at night, a crowd of people began to form. Vampires walk along rooftops and jump on cars, setting off alarms. A large group of nightwalkers follow Marcel and Naruto. "Oh, how's your family?" Marcel asked. "They're fine, though everyone's off doing their own thing right now," Naruto said. It was only half true, but Marcel didn't need to know that. "Ah, forget 'em. If your blood relations let you down, you make your own, eh? You taught me that. And what's mine is yours, as always. Even my nightwalkers, the riff-raff," Marcel said. Marcel indicated to the vampires walking along and jumping from the rooftop, then he grabbed a branch off a tree they passed. "They're not exactly subtle, are they?" Naruto commented. He had gone through a lot of trouble back in the day doing damage control the last time somebody exposed the supernatural world at large to humanity. It was even more imperative now in the modern era, since all it takes is one slip up, somebody posts it online, and then it all goes to hell. It's the quarter. Ain't no such thing as subtle, baby. Marcel replied back. Marcel whistled with his fingers and the crowd cheered. One vampire brings forward Jane Ann, whose wrists were bound with rope. Jane Ann Devereaux, Marcel said dramatically. Give it up for Jane Ann. Come on, let's hear it. Jane Ann Devereaux, you have been accused of the practice of witchcraft beyond the bounds of the rules set forth, and enforced, by me. How do you plead? He turned abruptly and walked over to Naruto. Was that convincing? I studied law back in the 50s. Hold that thought. He turned back to Jane Ann. Seriously, Jane, tick-tock. You know the drill. How do you plead? He asked. I haven't done anything wrong. Jane Ann denied. The crowd laughed quietly. That's a lie. You know it, I know it, and you hate that I know it. It drives you witches crazy that I'm aware of your every move. That you can't do magic in this town without getting caught. Marcel said as he pulled some leaves off his branch. So, why don't we just cut to the chase, huh? You tell me what magic you're brewing. I mean, tell me. I'll grant you leniency. Hey, I am, after all, a merciful man. Naruto and the crowd observed in utter silence. Jane Ann scoffed, a disgusted look on her face. Rot in hell, monster. Jane Ann said, her voice filled with venom. Shocked murmuring rumbled through the crowd, while Marcel smiled, though Naruto could tell he didn't like Jane Ann mouthing off to him. I'll tell you what, I'll give you one more chance. Marcel said as he started to walk away. Without warning, he swung the branch he'd been holding so fast that he would have sliced open Jane Ann's neck. Luckily for Jane Ann, Naruto preferred to hear what she has to say from her own lips. Faster than any of the vampires could follow, he caught the branch before it touched Jane Ann's neck, snapping the branch in half. Even faster still, Naruto moved behind each vampire present except for Marcel, snapping their necks and moving on to the next, snapping them so fast that the vampires all appeared to have their necks snapped at the same time. You should know better than to get between me and my business, Marcel. Naruto said as he reappeared behind Marcel after the necks of every other vampire present. As soon as he heard that, he felt a hand on his neck and it was lights out for Marcel as well. As Naruto let go of Marcel and let him hit the ground hard, Jane Ann was let out a sigh of relief. She was certain she was going to die when Marcel brought her to stand trial. It would not have mattered much as Sophie was more than capable of continuing the plan in the event of Jane's death, but now she was alive and could convince Naruto to help them. Her breath stilled as he approached her. Watching what just happened was a frightening sight to behold. She had only blinked and all the vampires around her had their necks snapped. It really illustrated to her the difference between an original and a vampire like Marcel. Now then, my dear. Let's have a chat, Naruto said, and if one were to blink at this moment, the hybrid and witch would be nowhere to be seen. Lafayette Cemetery. Naruto and Jane Ann reappear in front of the cemetery. Thank you for that. I was sure I was dead back there. Jane Ann said as Naruto pulled off the ropes binding her. You might still be if I don't like what you have to say, Naruto mentioned as he threw the ropes that once bound her to the ground. It's very bold of you, plotting against me, or so I hear from Katarina. I asked her to word it like that. Jane Ann revealed. After all, one does not plot openly against Naruto Michaelson and live to tell about it. It's been so long since someone actually did that I figured that you would want to see this in person. And now you're here. Fine, you clearly wanted me here in New Orleans, so what do you want? Naruto questioned. To explain that, I'll have to take you to the cemetery. Jane Ann said as she walked past the threshold, Naruto following close behind her. Before Jane Ann could ask, he explained it to her. I was invited in centuries ago, plus, out of all of my family, I am the one most trusted by your ancestors. They eventually enter one of the mausoleums, to find Sophie and several witches waiting for them. When Sophie saw Jane Ann was alive and unharmed, she enveloped her in a hug, which was returned back by her older sister. After the two had their moment, Sophie steeled herself and turned to address Naruto. Sophie began by saying, "You know you're famous in this city. Witches tell bedtime stories about the powerful vampire Naruto. We know Marcel was nothing but an orphan street rat, until you made him what he is. And now he's out of control. He does what he wants, he kills who he wants, and terrorizes us. We are gonna stop him, and you're gonna help us." Naruto raised an eyebrow before he chuckled. "Right, because threatening the guy you want to help you always works out so well." "Listen," Sophie tried to say, but Naruto cut her off. "No, you listen. I'm in a bit of irritable mood right now, because I just found out that the son that I adopted, raised, and thought was dead for a century is alive and never tried to reach out to me. You had better tell me why you tricked me into coming back to this city, or this mausoleum may be in need of a new paint job." Naruto demanded, getting angrier by the moment for what he felt was a waste of his time. "Naruto," the tribrid heard. He turned to see Haley, who had been on and off his mind since that wonderful night almost a month ago. "You need to listen to them." "Haley, what are you doing here, little wolf?" Naruto said as he stepped closer to Haley, eyeing her up and down to see if she was hurt, the witches taking note of this. He turned back to Sophie and Jane Ann angrily and said, "What are you doing, holding this woman hostage here? Marcel may be able to tell when we are practicing real magic in this town, but as keepers of the balance, we can still know when nature has cooked up something new. For example, my sister has a special gift of sensing when a girl is pregnant." Jane Ann said, explaining the situation without actually saying anything. "Okay," Naruto said, looking at Haley. "Naruto, I know it's impossible," Haley tried to say, but she was having a hard of a time understanding this. Naruto stilled, schooling his expression. "Mr. Michaelson, Haley is carrying your child," Jane Ann said, deciding somebody needed to just say it. "And look, before you accuse me of sleeping with someone else, I haven't been with anyone since that night with you nearly a month ago," Haley said, trying to reassure Naruto that she hadn't slept with anyone else. Naruto, even without his werewolf ability to detect lies, knew that everything that had been said was the truth. Naruto took several moments to himself, nodding his head a few times, taking a deep breath and calmly saying, "All right, then." This calm response to what is normally earth-shattering news surprised the witches and the werewolf in attendance. "You seem very calm and unsurprised for finding out that is supposed to be impossible," Jane Ann noted. "I'm a millennia old, darling. I'm not senile," Naruto said, turning back to the witches. "My body has felt like it's half alive, half dead since I went back to being a hybrid. I knew, or rather suspected, that something like this was possible." The witches let that sink in for a moment before Sophie continued. "My sister performed the spell she needed to confirm this pregnancy. Because of Jane Ann, the lives of this girl and her baby are now controlled by us," Sophie said. This was news to Naruto and Haley. "If you don't help us take down Marcel, so help me, Haley won't live long enough to see her first maternity dress." "Wait, what?" Haley said, shocked and angry. "You're saying that if you die, I die?" Naruto, who had turned away, turned slowly to face Sophie, his anger barely restrained, his voice frighteningly quiet, his hands clenched so hard that they were starting to bleed. His temper was reaching its limit and he was one more sniping comment away from erupting into a blind rage. But he knew he couldn't. So, Naruto turned toward Haley, from whose abdomen he could hear a small but rapid heartbeat. He closed his eyes, listening intently, focusing only on the sound of his child's beating heart, letting the slowly building joy he was starting to feel at finally being a father calm him down. Finally, Naruto reopened his eyes and said, "Clear the room. I need to speak with her alone." Everyone could tell that it was not a request, so everyone present except Naruto and Haley cleared out of the room. Naruto paced back and forth while Haley sat down. After a few moments of awkward silence, Naruto said, "So, they've been holding you captive here. They haven't been mistreating you, have they?" No, they lured me out to the bayou a few nights ago and grabbed me. And they did all these weird witchy tests. Not that I understand how this could happen. I mean, vampires are dead. They can't have children, Haley said. Perhaps if you knew my backstory a little better, it might explain how this is possible, little wolf. Here, Naruto said, sitting down next to Haley. He reached to touch her temple but she backed away slightly. What are you doing? Haley asked. She may like this 1,000-year-old hybrid, but she didn't exactly know what he was trying to accomplish right. Relax. If you open your mind to me, I can show you my memories. Naruto said. Haley then let Naruto cup her face as their foreheads touched. In the beginning, our family was human. 1,000 years ago, now. Naruto began. Flashback. Come, Henrik. Our brothers are fighting again. Rebecca said to her younger brother. Although our mother, Esther Michaelson, dabbled in the dark arts, we were actually just a family trying to survive in a time when it was hard to do so. And, for better or worse, we were happy. Naruto narrated. Present day. That is, however, until one night, our youngest brother was killed by our village's greatest threat. Naruto continued. Flashback. Klaus came home, carrying Henrik's dead body. Mother. Klaus shouted, desperate for her to help. Present day. Men that could transform themselves into wolves during the full moon. Our family was devastated, none more than I. Naruto said, causing Haley to look at Naruto. Henrik's death was my fault. I was supposed to be watching him that night, but that innate curiosity that all untriggered werewolves have got the better of me and I took him out to watch the wolves transform. The wolves didn't harm me, likely sensing I was one of them, but they tore Henrik to pieces. Desperate to protect the rest of us, Michael forced Esther to call upon her black magic in order to make us stronger. Naruto continued. Flashback. Michael was holding a bleeding human in front of Rebecca. Drink. He told Rebecca, which she did. Present day. Thus, the first vampires were born. But with this speed, this strength, this immortality, came a terrible thirst for human blood. No one felt this hunger more than me. For a time, I drank animal blood. It wasn't as satisfying but it kept the cravings down. But the next full moon came. The urge to feed from a human was too strong to resist. Flashback. Klaus attacked a human, feeding on that person until they died. When I killed for the first time, everyone knew what I truly was. Naruto said. Klaus realized something was wrong. All of a sudden he screams, his bones breaking and resetting themselves. Michael and Elijah come running toward him. Nicholas. Elijah said, prepared to rush to help his brother. What is happening to me? Klaus screamed in pain. Don't. Michael said to Elijah holding him back. Elijah. It hurts. Klaus said, before he roared toward the moon as his bones finished breaking themselves. He's a beast, an abomination. Michael said in disgust as soon as he saw Naruto golden eyes, extra set of fangs, and longer veins. Present day. I wasn't just a vampire. Naruto said. You were also a werewolf. That's how the werewolf curse works. It isn't activated until you take a life. Haley said. I was the result of an indiscretion our mother had hidden from us all. An affair, with a werewolf like yourself. Naruto said, smiling at her. Flashback. Esther was standing in front of a fire, casting a spell. Infuriated by this betrayal, Michael forced Esther to cast a spell that would prevent me from accessing my werewolf side, denying me any connection with my heritage. Michael tried to bind Naruto to a wooden cross, however Naruto was too strong for Michael. Elijah. Elijah, hold him down. Michael ordered. Brother, please, don't let them do this to me. Klaus pleaded with Elijah. Do it now, boy. Now. Michael ordered again, and this time, Elijah helped to bind Klaus. Please, help me, Klaus pleaded, before a black miasma engulfed his form, sealing access to his werewolf side. Present day. Your dad was a dick, Haley said bluntly. Naruto chuckled a little. You know, you and your family are legendary. All the rumors about you controlling how the world runs from the shadows. Your temper is the stuff of legends and you're considered a psycho in some circles, And instead of running for the hills when I had the chance, I ended up sleeping with you. Classic me, she said, though not that she regretted that night. Well, after living 1,000 years, nobody stays completely sane. Naruto admitted, as those times when he lost his temper, it usually led to a lot of death and destruction. I've always had a bit of a temper, but ever since I regained my werewolf powers, it feels like my aggression and anger is just off the charts. After a few moments of silence, Haley said apologetically, I'm sorry they told you like that. No one should have to find out they're a parent like that. I think I'm the one who should be apologizing. I almost lost my temper back there and slaughtered them. And you would have been an unfortunate casualty as well. Both of you. Naruto said. Hey, I'm a werewolf too, I get it. Whenever something pisses you off, you want to rip it to shreds. She said in an understanding way, since she had met other triggered werewolves who still had anger issues. Naruto, these witches have more going on than they claim and they can kill me, sorry, us. What do we do? Haley said as she placed a hand gently on her stomach, which caused Naruto to place his hand on hers. I swear to you, little wolf, they will not harm you. Naruto said, coming up with a plan of his own, as he felt protective of his little wolf. I'm gonna bring them back in here. A minute later, the witches were back inside the tomb. So, how do you propose this will work? Naruto asked. You'll need to cement your place in Marcel's world. His inner circle, the Daywalkers, that's where we begin. They're his friends, his family. We'll be hitting him where it hurts. Sophie said. That's fine and all, but there is still the issue of Jane Ann. Naruto said, everyone present turning to Jane Ann, Marcel nearly executed you and I saved your life. He's probably looking for us right now. Naruto walked forward, his fangs and claws showing. Now before you say anything, he's not gonna stop until he has some kind of proof that you are dead. While I'm not going to kill you, I do need some of your blood. Jane Ann didn't look comfortable with that, but Marcel needed to be thrown off their trail. Okay, just, don't take too much. Jane Ann said as she pulled her shirt down a bit to expose her neck more. Your cooperation is appreciated but not necessary, Naruto said as he wrapped his arms around Jane Ann and bit her neck, drinking her blood and causing her to moan. His eyes went black for a minute as he read her mind and saw all her memories. He'd have to deal with this later. He purposely spilled most of the blood he drank on his face, before letting go of her and spitting some blood on his hands. He then gave Jane Ann some of his blood. He made to walk out of the mausoleum, but not before addressing the others. If anything happens to Haley while I'm gone, I'll wipe out all of your bloodlines. Seeing them shudder in fear like he expected, Naruto sped off into the night. New Orleans French Quarter. Naruto arrived at Marcel's place. Marcel and his inner circle had regrouped to brainstorm where Naruto might have taken Jane Ann while the Nightwalkers searched the streets. Marcel saw Naruto and stood up, taking note of his blood-soaked appearance. Sorry about snapping your neck, son, but like I said, I taught you better than to get between me and my business. Naruto said as he licked the blood off his fingers. Marcel chuckled nervously, suddenly remembering the times before someone had gotten between Naruto and what he wanted and how those fools had been eviscerated. Yeah, sorry about that. Got a little caught up in the show and all. So, Jane Ann. Won't bother you again. Dumb bitch that she could plot against me and get away with it. I reminded the witches of New Orleans that one does not plot against me and live to tell the tale. Naruto said. The quarter is your home, but I would like to stay a while, provided that my welcome has not been rescinded. Naruto said. A wide grin spreads across Marcel's face, and he placed his hands on Naruto's neck, chuckling. Plantation. The next day, Haley and Elijah were in a huge, white plantation house, which was the home that belonged to Marcel's human father formerly before his death. Elijah had arrived last night. Naruto figured Marcel would not think to look here for Haley. Haley pulled a sheet off of a crib, coughing because of the dust. Elijah had arrived last night and Naruto had filled him in on what was going on. Are you all right? Elijah asked. Just dust. This place is ancient. Haley commented. Yes, it should serve our purposes. It's a sanctuary from our business in the quarter. Right now, you are easily one of the most important people in this family. You need a good home. So I'm curious, in all this time, has anyone asked you how you feel? Elijah asked. About having a miracle baby or being whatever I am to Naruto Michaelson. She asked, still not sure what her and Naruto were now, but all of it was daunting to her. About being a mother. Elijah asked. I was abandoned when I was born and my adoptive parents kicked me out the second that I turned into a wolf. So, I don't really know how I feel about being a mother because I never really had one. Haley said. I will always protect you. You have my word on that. Elijah stated. Naruto appeared at this moment, leaning on the doorway. And noble Elijah always keeps his word. Hello little wolf. Naruto said as he flashed a smile at Haley and tried not to let his annoyance at Elijah show. Is it done? Elijah asked. As a matter of fact, yes. Marcel was only too happy to accept my apology and I remain a welcome guest in the French Quarter. Though, I am concerned about this coven of impudent witches. Naruto said, not admitting openly that he was concerned for Haley's safety and his child's. I believe them to be honorable. They did release Haley to you. Although, they haven't been entirely forthcoming. Marcel obviously has something that they need. They don't want him dead. There must be a reason why. Elijah said. Elijah and Naruto walk in another room. In addition to the secret weapon he uses to control the witches, Marcel has assembled a small army of vampires. Working together, we can destroy them from the inside. Elijah stated. And what of Rebecca and Aurora? Naruto asked, as he really had no way of really knowing how his wives were going to take it that they didn't get to have his first children. They said they'd be along eventually. Elijah said. There is something else. They know you are here, and after I demonstrated the strength of the originals to these youngsters, they are more than a bit frightened about having to walking around. I'm gonna need to do something about that. Naruto said. And what is it that you need to do? Elijah said. What do you think? Naruto asked rhetorically, as he pulls out one of his daggers. I thought you said the daggers would no longer affect us. Elijah said, filled with unpleasant memories of the daggers. They don't. But no one outside of Apocrypha knows that. This dagger has been enchanted to replicate the dagger's effects, but it's only a one-time use. Once it's pulled out, it would have to be enchanted again to be used again. Naruto said as he approached Elijah. It's only for a bit. I'm assuming he will bring you to wherever he is keeping his secret weapon. I won't ask you to do it, but this does need to happen, Elijah. Naruto said as he implied that he would do it himself if Elijah did not. So, Elijah daggered himself, desiccating just like the old days. He put Elijah in his coffin and delivered him to Marcel. Later that night, everything okay? Naruto asked as he watched from Haley's bedroom door as she looked up and moved her laptop so that it was on the bedside table and gestured for him to join her on the bed. Yeah, I'm okay. She said. I want you to know that despite my initial reaction, I am happy about this pregnancy and I'm glad it's with you. He said, as he imagined Haley being a part of his life as they raised their baby together. I think I am too, though the whole witch thing still has me concerned. She said, thinking about what would happen to her and the baby if Sophie fell and hurt herself or got hit by a bus. I won't let anything happen to you. Neither of you. He said, pulling her in for a hug as he stroked her hair and gently pressed a kiss to her forehead. Chapter 15. It had been 1 week since Naruto learned that Haley was pregnant with his child and put Elijah to sleep and given him to Marcel as a peace offering. During that time, he took advantage of being alone with the mother of his child to get to know her as well as get closer to her. It was due to getting to know her and wanting to keep her and the baby safe that he had her stay in the plantation house, while he handled any business in the quarter, since it wasn't safe for werewolves in the French Quarter. Which meant that while he was out dealing with any Marcel or witch-related business, she was stuck in the house alone waiting for him to come home. Speaking of Haley, aside from the threat of death from witches, her time with Naruto had been good. He was kind to her, reminding her of their time in Mystic Falls. Since she was stuck in the house, the only things she could do was read, watch TV, mess around on the internet, or talk and spend time with Naruto when he was around. She was never one for reading, given that ever since she had been kicked out by her abusive adoptive parents, she had been moving from place to place. But since there was nothing to do, she had started to pick up the habit. "Ah, little wolf, you're still awake. I was hoping you would be," Naruto said happily as he entered the house and leaned against the doorway of the living room to see her reading her book on the couch. "I was waiting for you." "Okay, not true. I was about to go to sleep but you're back early. Everything okay Marcel-wise?" she asked, wondering if him being early was his choice or Marcel's. "Everything is fine. There's only so much of him parading around my family's mansion and pretending that it's his that I can take for one day," he said, sitting next to her on the couch as she turned to face him as she tilted her head. "Are you going to take it back?" she asked. "Can't say for sure. Right now, I am only observing what all Marcel has done with the place since I've been gone. Going over the history of supernatural New Orleans in the last century. For the moment, I'm content to let him rule, because the situation isn't untenable yet, and does not require my direct intervention," Naruto said. "You did say you were going to help the witches," Haley mentioned. "Only because your life and our child's life was in danger. There's a lot you still don't know about these witches. They think they can manipulate and lie to me. They have no idea who they are messing with," Naruto said before he remembered. "Speaking of which, I'll be right back." He sped up to his office and sped back a second later, only a cup with some kind of blue glowing liquid in it. "You remember last night when you let me look through your memories of when they held you captive?" Naruto asked and she nodded. "Well, I managed to study the incantation Sophie Devereaux used to link her life to yours. And I have a way to fix it. First, I'm going to drain the link away." Haley nodded, the part of him being a siphoner not surprising her, as he already told her about it, which he told her when he was working on a way to get rid of the link. Haley closed her eyes as Naruto held his hands on either side of her head, his hands glowing, and soon enough the link to Sophie was drained away. It was a one-way link anyway, as Sophie would not suffer if Haley was injured in any way, so Sophie would not know if the link was suddenly removed. Now the link is gone. But simply removing it is not enough. Naruto snapped his fingers as a circle of salt and candles appeared in the middle of the living room. "I'll need you to lie down in the middle of the circle so I can apply the enchantment." "What is it that you're doing?" Haley asked as she stepped into the middle of the circle and laid on her back slowly. "We need to make sure you can't have a link like that reapplied. That, and I want to make sure you're protected from harmful magic and potions," Naruto said as he clapped his hands together and began chanting, "Dion Cha Bwaranik, Tionika on Ualed Olc. Dion 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 Cha Bwaranik, Tionika on Ualed Olc." As Naruto finished chanting, Haley felt a feeling of warmth, comfort, and protection wash over her. She had started to trust him over the week they had been here, and she was happy to be free of these witches. Haley felt like a massive weight on her shoulders was lifted in that moment. "So, now we can leave New Orleans," Haley said as Naruto helped her up, as it wasn't safe for her to stay. They may have undone the link, but who's to say that the witches won't find out and try some other way to hurt her? "Well, not yet. There's still some pieces I'm missing, like what it is the witches are after. I need to know more before I decide to leave New Orleans to Marcel, or if I should re-establish Klaus Michaelson as the leader of the community," Naruto said. Honestly though, he would have to get directly involved soon, what with Divina Claire and this whole harvest ritual, which he learned from drinking Jane Ann Devereaux's blood when covering for her. "Speaking of Michaelsons, have you talked to Elijah since we moved in here?" she asked, wondering why Elijah had been absent in the last week. "Last I spoke with him, he agreed to run an undercover mission for me infiltrating Marcel's camp," he said, figuring he should be honest with her. Naruto checked his phone to see the time. Well, I can see you're tired and want to sleep. I'll see in the morning. Naruto said affectionately as he got and went into his office. 10 minutes later. Elijah, Naruto, we're here like you wanted, so get out here now, said an angry Rebecca with Aurora as she entered the house, not noticing Haley on the stairs. Who are you, or should I assume you're Rebecca Michaelson? Haley asked, knowing that Naruto had a sister, who was also one of his wives. She had already met Aurora back in Mystic Falls. Oh, you must be the maid. Our bags are in the car, get them for us, will you? And I am, Rebecca said, assuming that she was nothing more than the help of the house. Hello, I'm not the maid, she said, offering a polite smile as she walked down the few stairs between them as she closed in the distance. She also put down the iron poker, not that it would have done any good. Rebecca, she's the werewolf girl our husband knocked up, Aurora said, being blunt for Rebecca, and regarding Haley with a scathing look. That's one way of putting it, Haley said. The whole situation felt awkward as Haley was the knocked-up mistress and now she was dealing with her lover's wives. I was expecting to see some kind of supernatural miracle baby bump, but I guess you're not showing yet, Rebecca said, looking at her stomach looking for signs of her pregnancy but seeing nothing still. Naruto's office. Naruto was focused on the information he obtained from Jane Ann, looking over a timeline. He had several points figured out. He knew when the harvest ritual occurred, and how much time they had left before the cataclysm began, which is the name for what happens when a group of ancestral witches don't finish the harvest ritual. Pompeii was the perfect example of the fate that would befall New Orleans if they didn't finish. He was also going over what he knew about the witches. Agnes was militant, being one of the main people who pushed to use the slaughter method of the harvest ritual, which was the outdated and inferior method to the one that he developed and presented to the Nola witches centuries ago when they first arrived and would need to be dealt with. Once she was dead, there would be no one among the witches who could fulfill the role of elder, and that would mean he would have to finish the ritual himself. Looks like I have some more people to kill, Naruto muttered, disliking the fact that he would have to kill that poor girl, Davina Claire. He had no real choice. He had seen the effects of trying to switch methods halfway through the ritual. He couldn't do that, especially not to the city that had always been one of his favorites. It was then that he heard his wife's voices inside the house, and he got up to exit his office. Outside his office. Rebecca, Aurora, I knew it. I assume the 6 dead vampires at the bar outside the city were you're doing, he stated as he walked out of his office. They were very rude, trying to victimize a couple of poor, innocent girls just trying to find their way to the quarter, Rebecca said, giving her husband what she thought was a convincingly innocent look. I doubt that's what happened, Haley mentioned off to the side. The idea that a couple of originals could be victimized by a bunch of baby vamps was laughable. Aurora turned to regard Haley with a cold look. Nobody asked for any lip from you, wolf girl, Aurora said with a snarl, which surprised Rebecca, not expecting such callousness from her sister wife. Haley certainly didn't like remark from Aurora as she glared at her. Is there a problem here? Haley demanded. Yes, there is, mongrel, Aurora growled as she bared her fangs and showed her true face. My problem is you, being pregnant with my husband's child. Naruto pinched the bridge of his nose in irritation even more than he already had been. Hey, I didn't ask for your husband to go and knock me up, bitch, Haley growled as her werewolf eyes manifested. Haley had been playing nice because it would make her time here easier if the other wives could at least tolerate her, but she wasn't going to take these insults and snippy comments lying down. No, you just hog all his attention on the day he was supposed to be spending with me, Aurora retorted back, her delicate hands curling into fists that could wring the life from just about anyone. It seemed Aurora was still mad about that, though he was surprised. He had thought he had sufficiently made up with Aurora over the whole incident. And don't act like you didn't enjoy it. You spent 5 hours in bed with him. You were practically begging for it as the night dragged on. Haley growled at that. Not that she could refute Aurora's words. Haley remembered very clearly that night she spent with Naruto and how well he fucked her, with her wanting more and more as the night went. That didn't mean she wanted the special time she had with Naruto used against her by Aurora. Her hand was clenched into fist and Aurora's temper was getting out of check as she snarled at Haley. All of a sudden, the temperature seemed to drop by 50 degrees in the room, to the point where chills started to run up the spines of the three women. They all turned to the source, Aurora and Haley's rage temporarily forgotten, to see Naruto with his hybrid face showing, shadows seemingly covering his body, making him appear as some evil creature born out of a pit of darkness. Cease this ridiculous argument. Right now, Naruto stated harshly, his own annoyance and anger giving off the intended effect. Power and authority radiated through the house, a shiver traveling down the spines of all three women, as they stared into his now red eyes. He was clearly very annoyed with the snark and callousness displayed by his wives towards his lover, and knew he needed to put a stop to this right now before it got out of hand. Rebecca, Aurora, I want to speak with you two privately in my office. This instant, Naruto ordered, not letting up on the pressure. It was a rare thing to see him that angry and annoyed with Aurora and Rebecca. For Haley, this was the first time that she was truly seeing him as the original hybrid, the monster every supernatural being was supposed to respect and fear above all others. Haley, get some sleep. I'll see you in the morning. Naruto said as he placed a hand on her shoulder, letting up on the intensity once Rebecca dragged Aurora to his office, and knocking Haley out of her trance. Sure, Haley said with a bit of a stutter, having been reminded just now that despite the softer side he had been showing, he was still the most dangerous and powerful being on the planet. Naruto's office. Naruto re-entered his office, closing the door behind him and placed a silencing rune on the door, so Haley's werewolf hearing wouldn't pick up what was being said. He didn't need her waking up in case he got into an argument with his wives. Once he was done with the rune, he turned around, seeing Rebecca lounging in a chair and Aurora leaning on his desk, her arms crossed and her face even crosser. I did not care for that outburst of yours earlier, Aurora. Naruto said as he walked forward. I may understand the reason for your anger, but that little display earlier was unacceptable. I was under the impression we had made up over this. I was under impression that I would never have to see her again. That it was a one-time encounter and she would be gone. I don't want her here. Aurora said almost petulantly. You are the one who suggested and even gave permission for this little harem thing. You do not get to backtrack 1,000 years later when you finally meet one that you don't like. That's quite hypocritical of you, my dear wife. Naruto pointed out. Why is she pregnant? You've known this was possible since before we took the elixirs, so how did it happen? Rebecca asked, out of a curious desire. Naruto had known it was possible now that he was a hybrid, he had mentioned as much to them when Catherine was presented with the elixir, so why did it happen? I got caught up in the heat of the moment and forgot to apply my enchantment. Naruto admitted, partially ashamed at forgetting and also thinking he could get away with having raw sex like he used to before his wolf side was unlocked again, causing Rebecca to laugh and Aurora to scowl. That's hilarious. You're 1,000 years old and you basically forgot to wear a condom, like some horny teenager. Rebecca laughed. You might find it funny, Rebecca, but I do not. Aurora shouted, silencing Rebecca. Why are you allowing her to live with you when she is little more than a one-night stand? Because I am a man that takes responsibility for the choices he makes. Naruto said calmly. I will not abandon the woman carrying what will be my firstborn child. That said, my affection for her is not enough to protect her life if she suddenly tries to abort the child. I will punish anyone who would dare to commit such an act against me. Anybody? Aurora asked him, her voice trembling with emotion. Even me, my sweet love. You know I would never wish to hurt you, Aurora. But I would make sure that if you did commit the atrocity of murdering my unborn child, that you would be taught a lesson you would never forget. Naruto intoned. He obviously didn't want to say these things to Aurora. She was his beloved wife, but she needed to understand that even she was not above punishment if she dared to inflict that kind of injury on him. The room was silent for several moments while Aurora looked at him. I think I'm going to sleep alone tonight. Aurora announced and barged out of the room, tears starting to pool in her eyes. Naruto sighed as he knew she was too upset right now to reason with. Now as he sat at his desk, ran a hand through his hair. She'll come around. She just needs time, Rebecca said as she placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. I know that. I'm not surprised that she's angry at me, I'm just disappointed. I thought she understood how important this was for me, Naruto said. It's important to all of us, Rebecca reminded him. She's upset because it's somebody she doesn't know nor has she learned how to like yet. I'm fairly certain she would still be upset if it was you, or Katarina, or even Bonnie that got pregnant first, Naruto said. She would be, but she'd be less upset and swallow any irritation she did have for our sakes. She's been your wife the longest. She's been first in everything with you. I think she views it as her right as your first wife to have your very first natural child. And now she can never have that, Rebecca explained. I noticed you're not nearly as upset about it as I would have thought. You seem more amused than anything, Naruto pointed out. I'm not as attached to this as she is. Obviously, I care about it, but it isn't as big of a deal that I don't get to be first. So long as I get my turn to have a child with the man I love, I don't care how long it takes, Rebecca admitted. Naruto held out his arm to her after contemplating for several moments. Rebecca looked at him for an explanation. There is much I have to explain, and this way will be much faster, Naruto said. Rebecca bites down on her husband's arm, drinking his blood. Naruto's eyes turned black and Rebecca's turned black a moment later, as Naruto shared what he has learned so far. Seeing people's entire lives and every thought that ever passed through their minds was a unique ability only he had, but he had learned how to share the information he learns with other vampires by sharing his blood freely. You can't be serious, Rebecca exasperated as she finished drinking her husband's blood and seeing the memories of Jane Ann that he had seen. I am, sadly, Naruto said. What were these witches thinking? You made a better method so they wouldn't have to kill those poor kids and they go and do that anyway, she mentioned. I know, I dislike what I'm going to have to do because of this, but it needs to be done. You've seen what happens when one doesn't finish the ritual, Naruto said with a dark tone. I know, Rebecca said, remembering when he had shown her memories of the Pompeii erupting and killing everyone, which he learned by visiting the shattered ancestral plane centered there during the Renaissance. And these witches, they don't realize what we are to their community, she questioned. No, I don't even believe they realize how deeply connected we are to their ancestors. I believe that they haven't been communicating with them in the last generation or two, or something is preventing them from communicating with their descendants. That will require its own investigation, Naruto explained. So, for now, we act like we are a house divided, Rebecca stated, as that had been one of several methods he had been planning on employing. Only too late will they realize that we are the only way they are going to survive long enough to see Christmas, Naruto said as he laid out a plan for the witches. The next morning, Aurora was sitting by herself in her expensive robes, having some tea. Rebecca walked behind her towards the door. Where are you off to, Rebecca? Aurora wondered. The quarter. I have some business I need to attend to. I'll be back later. Rebecca waved back and exited the door. Naruto walked down the stairs and Aurora looked basically anywhere but where Naruto currently was. I know you're still mad at me, but perhaps instead of sulking here in the house, you might take your mind off of it and go visit Marcel, Naruto said as she turned to him. Marcel is here. He's alive, Aurora asked in shock as this was news to her. Why didn't you tell me last night? I didn't get around to it, what with you being upset with me and not giving me a chance to tell you, Naruto said before she raced up to her room to change her clothes, eager to see her adoptive son. Naruto smiled and walked out the door to go deal with his business for the day. The French Quarter at Rousseau's. Sophie was scrubbing a table inside the restaurant when the door shut suddenly and she heard the whoosh of a vampire running unseen. She walked cautiously, listening for further sounds. Hello. Seriously, Marcel. Trying to scare me? I had nothing to do with the attack on your guys last night, Sophie yelled. Some hanging pots started moving behind Sophie, as though a wind has passed through them, and she turned around. She walked toward them slowly, then grabbed a knife, which she lifted in time for Rebecca to appear and grab her raised, knife-wielding arm. Sophie Devereaux. My brother, Elijah, told me about you. Know who I am? Rebecca asked. Yeah, I know, Sophie stated. Then you know we need to talk. Rebecca said. The cemetery. A few minutes later, Rebecca and Sophie talked while walking among the burial vaults of the cemetery. So, if I had to guess, knowing Naruto's history, Elijah likely has a dagger in his chest. It's a magical object, you're a witch. Do a locator spell, locate the dagger, locate Elijah for me. Rebecca demanded, lying to the girl as she clearly didn't know enough about the originals to know the relationship between her and Naruto and that she would almost never go against a decision he had made. I can't use magic. It's punishable by death. Marcel's rules. Sophie stated. Marcel, what do you think I'm going to do to you if you don't give me what I want? Rebecca said, playing up her annoyance. Not much. I've been linked, so anything you do to me, you do to Haley. Sophie said, completely assured of how safe she was. Who? Rebecca asked. Sophie gave her a look that said, seriously. Oh, right, the mumsy. Well, luckily for you, both of my brothers care about her, otherwise I'd break your neck right here. How did Marcel get so bloody powerful, anyway? He wasn't like this when we left a century ago. Marcel has a way to tell whenever there's magic done in the quarter and know exactly who is practicing it. The how isn't relevant, Sophie stated. I'll tell you what's not bloody relevant, a coven of witches who can't do magic. Here's an idea. Move away. Rebecca said, though she knew because of the ancestral link, it was a difficult call to make. We practice ancestral magic. This cemetery is filled with the remains of our witch ancestors. It offers us great power, but the downside is that we have to remain in New Orleans. If we run, we're leaving our legacy behind, our home, our family. Sophie said. Well, family's overrated. Look at me. I'm back in a city that's given me nothing but heartache, looking for a brother who's hell-bent on protecting a baby I don't care about. Rebecca said, sitting down. I find that hard to believe. You're here, aren't you? Sophie said, calling her out on her shit, completely unaware Rebecca was lying to her. I'm here for Elijah. The instant I find him, I'm gone. He was the one who idiotically believed this baby would help Naruto. And now he's missing, probably at the hands of Naruto himself. And you were foolish enough to believe that Elijah could convince Naruto to go against Marcel, when everyone knows that they have history. Rebecca said. Naruto sired Marcel. I'm aware. Sophie said. You don't understand. Marcel is not just some guy that Naruto turned into a vampire. Marcel is Naruto's adopted son. Rebecca said. Flashback. New Orleans, 1820. There was a funeral procession, all dressed in black, following behind a horse-drawn carriage. I was there the day that they met. We were burying Emile, the governor's only son, or so we thought. Turns out the governor had another son, from a mother that he owned. Rebecca narrated. There was a man on horseback whipping a young black boy, who screamed in pain with each lash. Naruto and Aurora stepped out of the procession to turn and look at the boy. The boy, having fallen to his knees in pain, grabbed an apple off the ground, turning and throwing at the man with the whip, a fierce look of hatred in his eyes. Infuriated, the man that had been whipping him winded up for another lashing, but Naruto grabbed a stone from the ground and hurled it with vampire strength at the man, piercing his skull, and he fell off the horse, dead. Rebecca and Elijah watch as Naruto and Aurora approach the boy. What is your name, child? Naruto said. Don't got one. Mama wouldn't name me till I turned 10, case the fever took me, then it took her. The boy said as he crouched. Naruto crouches down before the boy, getting on his level. You're a survivor, and survivors need names. How about Marcellus? Naruto offered. Marcellus? Marcel asked. It comes from Mars, the god of war, and it means, little warrior. Aurora said. Naruto stood and both ancient vampires held out a hand to the boy, who hesitated, but then smiled, grasping both of their hands and rose to his feet. Elijah and Rebecca had watched this entire exchange. Present, Naruto saw a bit of himself in the boy. He remembered how our father used to beat him as a child. He, too, was the bastard child of a man who saw him as nothing but a beast. And that is why your plan will fail. All you've done is bring back together a father and son. Without Elijah between them, who knows what they might do? Rebecca said as she walked off, while Sophie pondered on what Rebecca had said. Meanwhile, Haley decided that she had enough with the morning sickness after she had failed to keep down her breakfast for the third morning in a row, so she grabbed her laptop to look up if there was any local witch shops in the quarter, which she knew there would be since it was New Orleans. She didn't want to trouble Naruto with this, given her being here had already caused a major argument with his wives and she didn't feel like making things worse. Plus, she believed that because she was a werewolf and this was definitely not a regular pregnancy, she needed to go to a witch for some help. Just as she was getting closer to the shop she had looked up online, she saw the owner was beginning to lock it up for the day. Hey, please, this will only take a moment, Haley said, begging her since she knew that she couldn't go another morning or night where she had spent hours in the bathroom being sick. I just closed up, sorry. The owner Katie said after locking the shop door, as she tried to work out what was so familiar looking about the young female in front of her. I just need some kind of herb, she said, hoping that it wasn't a lot to ask for, although she had no idea which herb she needed or how many she would need to help her. What for? She said since it was clear that she didn't know which herb she needed. Morning sickness, I'm pregnant and I can't exactly go to a pharmacy because it's not a normal pregnancy, Haley said, trying to think of a way of explaining how different her pregnancy really was, without actually saying it. You're supernatural, right? I'm guessing a werewolf. Give me a minute, Katie said, opening the shop again as she entered the shop to retrieve the herb that she had in mind. Here, I cut this with Jimson weed, all you need is a few drops in some hot tea and that should do it, she said, handing her 2 different stopper bottles as Haley took out money from her bag. Thank you so much. Here, for your trouble, Haley said, handing her some money to pay for the herbs. It's on the house. It's a ugly town for werewolves, this was make it all better. I promise, Katie said, concerning Haley a little as Katie tried to put too much emphasis on the word, better. Later that night at a bar in the quarter, Marcel walked into a bar, his eyes searching the place until he spotted Naruto sitting at a table. I know that face, you got woman trouble. Naruto joked. You're a dick, you know that. Why didn't you tell me that mom was back in town? Marcel demanded. Well, I didn't want to spoil the surprise. It's a special reunion, a mother reuniting with her son, adopted or otherwise, especially when she believed him to be dead for a century. Naruto said, amused at how Marcel squirmed a little at the mention of that little fact. I better not come back home to find out that you've upset her, Marcel. Is there anything else that I need to know? Marcel asked. Only that she's in a bit of a mood right now because we are in the middle of an argument. Naruto said. So maybe that it was her who killed my guys? Marcel accused. Assuming that she was responsible, what exactly is it that you think you can do to her or would do to her? She helped raise you as much as I did. Naruto said, and Marcel was silent at that. Marcel's phone rang and he answers it. Naruto eavesdropped on the call, listening in with his vampire hearing. Yeah, Marcel answered. Just got a tip. Someone saw a pregnant werewolf in Bienville Park. Said the guy on the other end of the phone, who sounded like Thierry. Get a couple night walkers to run it down. Bring me back its head. Marcel says as he hung up. Unseen by him, Naruto clenched his fist under the table. He now realized that Haley had gone into the quarter, away from the safety of the plantation. He was not happy. He was furious, in fact, though he hid it well. Well, I guess that solves the mystery of the murdered riffraff. I'd say that puts your mother in the clear, Naruto stated. About that, I don't have time for the usual drama that comes with this family. You're my guest, so can you please keep mom from acting out? Marcel asked as he walked away. I can do a lot of things, son, but one thing I can't do is control your mother when she's upset. Naruto yelled back. He slipped out the back as well, rushing to find Haley, texting Rebecca on the way. With Haley. After Haley got the herbs, she decided to buy some tea so that she could take her herbal mixture to make her morning sickness easier to handle. However, after putting the herbs into the hot tea, Haley sat on the bench as she watched the city around her go by. Just as she was about to take a sip, she felt her instinct screaming, begging her not to drink the concoction. She didn't have long to ponder this, as a vampire appeared next to her followed by two others behind her. Dumb move coming into the quarter. You're coming with me, Wolf. He said forcefully as Haley stood up as she began to prepare herself to fight before her thoughts shifted to the baby in her. You know, I am sick and tired of being told what to do by fucking vampires. Haley said, throwing her tea in his face, making it sizzle and burn, steam literally coming off his face. All too quickly does Haley realize she almost drank vervain. Sniffing the air, she finally noticed the scent of wolfsbane mixed in with it, which burned her nose. To add even more confusion to the mix, a giant white wolf with red eyes, one easily as large as her, appeared out of nowhere and pounced on one of the vampires behind her before biting his head off before ripping into the other one and tearing his guts and heart out. As the one that Haley threw the tea at recovered, someone flashed behind him and broke his neck. It was then that Haley was able to see who it was. Now, that's no way to treat a pregnant lady. I do hate bad manners. Rebecca said, noting the presence of the great white-furred direwolf, vampire blood and guts staining its mouth and claws, taking a sniff at the bottle and wrenching its canine face in disgust. Rebecca turned to Haley and asked, "You all right?" "Yeah, I'm fine. I just want to check something." It smelled like wolfsbane and vervain. Haley said to her after checking the contents in the cup and bottle to find out Katie had given her wolfsbane and vervain to kill her baby with. She hadn't smelled either for some reason. Her pregnancy must be affecting her sense of smell. The massive wolf looked at Rebecca pointedly and Rebecca acknowledged him, knowing who the werewolf was. "I'll get her to safety," she said, and that seemed to satisfy the wolf, who turned around and sped off before Haley could call out to it and thank the wolf. "Come on, let's get you home, Haley," Rebecca said, knowing that they couldn't stay here with Marcel's vampires on the lookout for a werewolf girl. Plantation. When they eventually arrived at the plantation, Naruto was piling wood together so that he could use it to burn the dead vampire bodies. Haley stood out on the grass as she watched them deal with the fallout of what happened to her as she tried not to think about how she could have lost the baby and been murdered. Aurora was standing on the porch, off to the side, watching silently, knowing her husband was furious beyond words. She had been disappointed, spending time with Marcel today. He seemed almost desperate to be away from her and wanted nothing to do with her, which, given she was his adopted mother, really set her off. This left her largely in a sour mood, worse than she was when she went to bed last night. "This is why I told you never to leave this house. Werewolves are banned in the quarter. Any that show their faces are marked for death," Naruto said with a slightly raised voice at Haley as he tossed the bodies onto the pyre. "The thing is, I don't enjoy being locked up like a caged animal all day long," Haley said, slightly angered by the fact he was ordering her around again. She did know deep down that he meant well and was trying to protect her and the baby, but goddamn if it didn't grate her nerves, having him order her around. Although that could be just the pregnancy heightening her emotions. "Damn it. I had a plan to keep you safe and your little nighttime stroll nearly ruined it," Naruto said and then turned to Rebecca, who tried to help him with dealing with the bodies, and she had picked up the one that was still alive and was about to toss him on the fire. "Leave him. I need that one alive. Hey, don't snap at her. If it wasn't for her and that white werewolf, then this could have gone sideways," Haley shouted at him, now mad at him for rounding on Rebecca after she protected her. Aurora perked up at the mention of the white werewolf and looked at Naruto curiously. "The lot of you are leaving a trail of bodies right to these porch steps. Right to you and the baby," he said as he pointed at Haley. "If you hadn't overheard Marcel being tipped off about a werewolf lead, then everyone would be screwed, and don't give me that crap about having a plan. You've had a whole week to execute a plan and no one's seen you do a damn thing. Rebecca said. I have done more than you could imagine. Naruto declared, Aurora eyeing the argument with more interest. Do I honestly need to spell it out for you? I knew Marcel was never going to trust us. The boy spent 100 years letting us think he was dead, faking his death at Michael's hand so he could steal everything we built here and play at being the king of New Orleans. And to make it even more insulting, he has had his vampires constantly ingesting vervain, right in front of my face. So, with Marcel being down 6 vampires due to your little murder spree, my lovely wives, I put a spy of my own in his ranks, by compelling him before he had ever even tasted vervain, as it won't undo a compulsion that's already taken hold. He said, remembering how the teen that passed Marcel's little recruitment test earlier today and explaining how compulsion worked a little for Haley's benefit. And you compelled the blonde girl at the bar to get closer to Marcel for information too. Aurora said, piecing together what her husband had done. It's not like the girl needed much encouragement. All I did was give her a little nudge to accept Marcel's offer. And now, I have to go drain this fool of vervain, then compel him make him my spy and to believe his mates found God and moved to Alaska, so he can explain to Marcel why he just lost 3 more vampires. Naruto said, knowing that Marcel wouldn't be happy about losing so many of his crew in the last 2 days due to his family. So, you're gonna use and compel people into spying on him. Great. I'm going to bed now. Haley said, dripping of sarcasm as she refused to hide her hatred for vampires compelling people as they headed inside the house as she went towards the stairs. You're not going anywhere yet. I have a question that needs answered. Haley, what the fuck were you doing in the bloody French Quarter in the first place? He demanded as he sped in front of her and blocked her path, still mad over her leaving the house without telling him. Leave her be, Naruto. She needs rest. Rebecca said, knowing that Haley had a long day between the trials of pregnancy, the surprise wolfsbane and vervain being slipped into what she thought was medicine for her morning sickness, the attack on her and now this. You realize that I can smell wolfsbane and vervain on you. I could smell them on you the moment Rebecca brought you to the property line. Naruto said in snarl, his teeth grinding together, stepping closer to her as she suddenly felt scared of him. She realized what conclusion he would have come to from this knowledge. Aurora-eyed walked inside. Her interest was piqued yet again when she heard that, her mind jumping to conclusions as well about why Haley smelled like vervain and wolfsbane. It's not what you think. I've been having bad morning sickness the last couple days and wanted a something to help with it, but the witch gave me that instead. Haley said, placing a protective hand over her stomach. Naruto bore an angry look on his face, clenching his fists hard. His lie detection had not sounded any alarms and he could easily hear her heartbeat from this distance, so he knew she was telling the truth. He grit his teeth in anger as he bared his fangs. His hybrid features on full display, and he let out a mass amount of killing intent, unable to contain his absolute rage any longer. They fucking tried to murder my child. He thought angrily to himself. What is this? Haley wondered in fright, falling to her knees unable to breath. Paralyzed by what she realized was fear. She dared to look into Naruto's rage-filled eyes. She regretted it instantly as she saw herself die several times over. Even though his killing intent was not directed at her, the sheer quality of it, plus his sheer proximity to her, made it feel like he was. Naruto, calm yourself. None of this is good for her or the baby. Rebecca said as she grabbed his hand. My love, Aurora said as she walked to him and took his hand in hers, causing him to look at her. I care nothing, the werewolf girl, but Rebecca is right. Rein yourself in before you hurt her, or your child. Aurora's soothing words had the effect she wanted as Naruto breathed deeply and let off his killing intent. Haley gasped for air as she could finally breathe again. I'm sorry, Haley. Naruto apologized, ashamed of himself for losing his temper and letting his killing intent out with her so close to him. I gave Elijah to Marcel. Naruto said, sitting down by the steps of the stairs as both of his wives sat next to him while Haley leaned against the wall as she recovered from being exposed to his killing intent. What? Why would you do that? Rebecca asked. Marcel was nervous. It's bad enough I've returned to town, but Elijah as well. His crew was getting antsy. I didn't want them snooping around here and he wanted Elijah gone, so I gave him a temporary peace offering. Naruto said like it was nothing more than business. You bartered our brother, Rebecca said. Elijah agreed to run the mission for me to infiltrate Marcel's camp after I asked for his help. Right now, the one thing I care about is that my child is born. Naruto said, pointing to Haley's stomach. Everything I do here is a means of making sure that gets to live. If you don't like it, there's the door. He said, detached and unemotional as he headed into his office away from them. Porch. A few minutes later, Rebecca decided to check on Haley to make sure she was okay since she knew she had had a stressful day. Aurora had gone off to bed, still sleeping in a separate room from Naruto. She walked outside to see Haley sitting on the porch. Hey, I want to check on you. You okay? Rebecca asked. Sitting next to the werewolf is Haley. Yeah, I'm okay. I mean, it's not every day a witch tries to poison you to get to your unborn baby. Haley said while Rebecca watched her. Thank you, by the way, for looking out for me back there. Well, us girls have to look out for each other. Rebecca said. Can I ask you something? What is it with Aurora? I thought she hated me, but she just defended me back there. Haley asked. Aurora doesn't hate you much. She hates more the fact that you have something that she sees as her right. She is Naruto's first wife and has always been first in everything, up to this point. Now that you're pregnant, she can't have that. Rebecca said. You're saying that like you can get pregnant. I understand Naruto knocking me up, but, Haley paused, wondering why that would bother the ancient vampire so much. We recently found out why vampires can't get pregnant and took an elixir to remove it so we can finally have children with our husband. Aurora was especially looking forward to it, since when she married Naruto 8,000 years ago, they both understood that they couldn't have kids and now she can. They adopted children before, but it's not the same as raising a child of your own flesh and blood. Rebecca pointed out. Haley didn't say any more, having been given some things to think about. I'll let you get some sleep, Rebecca said, noticing that she had been ready for bed since she needed more sleep lately and was more tired due to the pregnancy. Haley back to her room to take a long hot shower as she tried to process everything that had happened in the last 24 hours before getting changed into her pajamas and getting into bed, where she fell asleep almost immediately. Early the next morning, Naruto wandered into her room while she slept. He walked over to where her bag from the day before lay as he took out the bottles that Katie had given her as he took the lid of one and smells the wolfsbane and vervain inside of it, causing him to growl. I didn't know that she had given me that. I wasn't trying to abort the baby, Haley said from where she lay as Naruto tried to hide his surprise that she was awake but silently laying there. You're up early, he stated as she sat up in bed, careful as to not upset her stomach as she began to sweep her hair out of her face. For hours now, like I said, I've been having bad morning sickness, not to mention this place is like a freaking swamp sauna, Haley said, knowing she was going to feel the lack of sleep later in the day. What stopped you from taking it once you knew what it was? Naruto said, looking her directly in the eye as she climbed out bed and walked over to him. Maybe it's because my biological parents gave me up as a baby, or maybe because my adopted parents abused me and kicked me out, but when I was in danger. When it was danger, I realized that I couldn't let anyone hurt it, Haley said, placing a hand in her stomach where her baby was. I'm beginning to see we're a lot alike, you and I. We're both outcasts, unwanted and abused by those we believed were our parents, who have learned to fight when back into a corner, he said, placing a piece of fallen hair behind her ear. Well, we're certainly backed into a corner now, right? She said, looking up at him. Indeed we are. And now we hunt our prey, my little wolf, he said, knowing that he would protect her and not just because of the baby. This whole thing with Marcel, the deal you made with the witches to take him down. You once loved each other like family, what happened? She asked. We thought he died when Michael came to the city looking for us. We each mourned him in our way, Naruto said. And when you got back, you saw that not only was he alive but was running the town that used to be yours and stolen everything that you had built. Haley said, sensing where he was going with this little speech, knowing it must have stung a little that the son he raised would steal from him. Now he's living in my home, he's sleeping our beds. You know, that, he stamps everywhere isn't for Marcel, it's for Michaelson. He said. The boy thought he could steal from me, and he must be shown the error of his ways. And knowing you will, but I want to make something very clear. She said, turning serious. What's that? He asked. I'm not some baby incubator. This baby is ours, meaning it'll be raised by both of us, so, no coffin for me. Haley said, knowing that she wouldn't let her baby be raised the way she was. I never planned to put you in a coffin. I wouldn't have it any other way. A child needs both their mother and father. Naruto said, realizing that he couldn't think of raising the child without her and doing it all on his own. 1 hour later, Rebecca met Naruto outside as she walked up to the plantation after visiting Marcel last night and said, "You were right. The girl, Cammy, she's the key. Marcel likes her, and because of that I got to see where they were keeping Davina." Well, don't stand on ceremony. Where is she? Naruto demanded, and here, Rebecca scrunched her eyebrows as she struggled to remember and kept drawing a blank. That clever bitch. I don't know, Rebecca said after stopping to think only to come up with nothing said. What's wrong? Naruto asked, knowing Rebecca usually had very good memory. She wiped my memory of the location. Rebecca angrily stated. That is a problem. Her power with the other 3 Harvest Girls is that strong already, eh? Naruto thought as he stroked his chin. And our brother is now in the hands of someone very dangerous who may not be able to control her power. I am finding Elijah, whatever it takes. Are you going to help me? Rebecca asked. Whatever it takes, Naruto stated. Chapter end. That's it for the story. Thank you for watching and I will try to find the next story.